Hey folks, General Manager Tony Mazzucco coming to you with our weekly Facebook Live for COVID and other town updates. We are going to go ahead and get started in just a minute. We have some important COVID updates and numbers that have changed that we want to go over with everyone, as well as updates on a couple other items. And then, of course, we'll take questions and we'll either answer them here during the live in the comments or we will get back to you. As always, you can email us at managers@norwoodma.gov with any questions you have or any comments or concerns, and we will do our best to get back to you. So welcome. It is August 27th, 2020, and we're going to jump in. Hi there, Catherine. As soon as people start logging on, we're going to jump into some of our COVID numbers and talk a little bit about what they mean. And then we'll have some updates on the couple of other items percolating around in the town. And as I said, we'll always be happy to take your questions and your comments as well. And you can email us at managers@norwoodma.gov. I do apologize. The Thursday setting for our Facebook Lives, I have still not put up any sorts of decorations or anything to make my background seem a little bit more appealing, but we will work on that. I had wanted to experiment with sharing my screen for some slides, but the last time we tried to do that, it threw the whole live into a tizzy, so we're going to have to play with that one night. So welcome, everyone. Hi there, Michelle. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm sure most of you have probably read the news or been following the state releases guidelines, and they color code communities based on their average daily incidence of COVID-19. And they take that average daily incidence and it's actually per 100,000 people. So sometimes for a community like Norwood that only has about 30,000 people, they have to do a little bit of math to get the numbers. Now the state categorizes you as gray, yellow, gray, green, yellow, or red. Yellow being moderate. Norwood up until now had been in the green or low category. We've now moved into yellow or moderate. But I want to talk about what that means and some of the numbers that led us there and what we should be concerned about and what we shouldn't be concerned about, using that as sort of a metric to look at the spread of COVID in the community in the greater area. So the way the state does the math is they take our total cases in a 2-week period, and then they divide the total cases by the 2 weeks. They then do the math to get the per 100,000 calculation, and if we tick over 4, it ends up meaning that we're yellow or moderate. That's 4 cases per day, or an average daily case rate of 4 per 100,000 people. Now, we don't have 4 cases per day, but we also don't have 100,000 people. So when you do the math, we're at 1.28, but extrapolate that out and we just get over 4. So what does that mean? That's a lot of math. And certainly the state and the health department do the math a lot better than I do. The difference for us in a 2-week period is really between the point seems to be between 16 or 17 cases. So I want folks to understand that because it's important to know what happens when you go from green to yellow. So 16 cases in a 2-week period for us, we would be green, 16 or less. And going to 17 means we are all of a sudden in yellow. So 1 case in a 2-week period can actually make that difference. Hey, Jeannie, we will talk a little bit about the hospital soon. No real update, but that's on our list to discuss perpetually, although there's a little bit of movement starting to happen on a couple of items. So keep that in mind when we look at going from green to yellow, that it's a difference of 1 case in a week. Now, the next 5 cases, 10 cases, 15 cases could all be in the yellow category and keep us there. But we were at, by our numbers and by the state's numbers, at about 18 cases in a 2-week period. So had we only been at 16, we'd still be green. Had we been 25, of course, we would be green. We would still be yellow. 1 case, one way or another, would can make that difference. So 1 or 2 less cases and we wouldn't have been green. And again, 1 or 2 more in the other direction, we would have continued to be yellow. So the state terms that as a moderate level of COVID, and the state itself is actually in yellow. What was interesting is around the time we switched, the state looks at these weekly, Foxborough, I believe it's Foxborough, Dedham, Westwood, and Canton all also went to yellow. They're all a little bit smaller than us, so still 1 or 2 cases can be what's the difference between green and yellow. We had a flat period shortly before the state released this particular tracking measure. We had about a 2-week period that we probably would have been in the gray category, which is really reserved for less than 5 cases. And it's really designed for largely the very small, more rural communities. But our numbers almost hit that at one point in time. So it is interesting that we would shift and see a slight increase right around the same time some other communities immediately adjacent to us would as well. we've dug into our numbers and a couple of things that are important. One is there's no correlation between the numbers we've seen in the last 2 weeks. There's not a super spreader event, which would be thousands of people anyway, but there was no big event like that. There was no cluster. There was no one residence or one family or one business or anything else like that. There's really no correlation between the cases whatsoever. We do know that 2 of the cases were actually out of state, or one of them has a Norwood address and has been living in another community. The other one was somebody who happened to be out of state and had been out of state for a little while and tested positive. Those still count as Norwood cases. So again, when we're talking about a difference of a couple of cases, there's a lot of things that can skew it one way or another. Let me show my comment feed up or down here. So 2 of our cases were effectively out of area cases. Our positivity rate is still 1.59%. Now, last week I was really happy because it was very, very low. Last week, I think everyone remembers I had drawn this incredible graphic of 1.19%. We've gone up, it's 1.59%. That's still a very low prevalence overall. We had actually felt our numbers were probably really low for a while, which is good, but lower than we thought. Now, one of the things we've discussed when we look at numbers is it's really your numbers are always from a week or 2 ago, and you need to see them change over the course of several weeks. So you have that sort of constant correlation. You have that data validation that, okay, the numbers we're seeing are the numbers we're seeing, that a trend is actually a trend and not just a jump up and down. We may see jump up and downs for quite a long time. And one of the reasons you may see it is as you have a case, we may have a number of cases that pop up, and what can happen, for instance, if you have a family of 5 and somebody ends up testing positive, there is a good chance that their household will end up also testing positive. So you may see spikes and then drops and spikes and drops. So we don't advocate any behavior change other than we hope everyone is practicing social distancing, wearing their masks, and washing your hands regularly. And again, just otherwise being a being a good citizen and being a upstanding citizen and wearing your mask. The one correlation we sort of do see, I know I said we don't see any correlations, really does happen to be social gatherings, parties. We're still seeing some spread tied to that, and that seems to be the only point when they do the contact tracing that we're seeing it's happening. And I've explained it before, but I think it's important to continue to make sure everyone understands why there's such a risk. The surface risk early on, so that's the spread from your home, from a railing or something. Early on, there was a lot of people panicking about that. There was a lot of concern. What the science has shown us is there's really, really very little risk in surface spread. You do want to clean high-touch surfaces. But remember, the example I always use is I would need to be currently positive with COVID, have many droplets or other fluids on my hand, touch a doorknob. You, in fairly short order, need to touch that doorknob and then go ahead and touch your face or touch an orifice. Is it possible? Of course it's possible. Anything's possible. Is it likely? Incredibly unlikely. The spread is really a person-to-person spread, and it's the longer and the closer you're in contact with people. So what does that mean when you're at a party? Think if you go to somebody's backyard party and you greet the host, you greet the other person, and then you're much closer to people. And I understand it's human nature. You don't want to sit 5 feet away from anyone or 6 feet away from them and yell to them. So you go to a party and you end up being a little bit closer to them. That's that spread. That's what it does. That's why we're able to see people in certain industries not necessarily have a spread, because they're not we're not the I just lost my train of thought, sorry, as I was reading comments, but it's person to person is where it transmits. That's what we got to be really concerned about, is how long. So you can work in an office, and even at town hall, for instance, in my particular office, I'm not very close to people on a day-to-day basis. I may step out in my office and there's some staff out here, but I'm not sitting face-to-face this close to somebody for 15 minutes, which is considered a contact. I'm going to take a pause here just to address a quick question, 2 questions actually. Doris had asked a question about something with Dedham Medical Center, and it seems like somebody's responded that they're a nurse for Dedham Medical Center. So Public health and healthcare are actually two separate things. So if there's a specific concern with what a private healthcare facility may or may not be doing, you reach out to them. It's not really what public health does. They are very different things. Public health and infectious disease control and epidemiology are very different than the healthcare model. And Katie responded here that she seems to work for them, and that maybe isn't the case. So again, with certain instances like that, you can always call the town. We do encourage you to reach out to us, but there are times where if it's a business decision, whether a particular medical office does test or doesn't test, that's really on them for what they do. So I'd encourage you to reach out to them, and it seems that Katie had some a good response here. Lee asked, can poll workers get tested after the election even if they are non-symptomatic? The general consensus is if you're not symptomatic, there's no value to just testing because you want to see. It's sort of a, well, I did this and then let me go get tested. It is a use of the resources. For the poll workers, they're behind plexiglass, and there should be no 15-minute or more contact for the poll workers. What they're doing is no different than any retail or restaurant worker or office worker who has a building open to the public. So if we're saying let's test poll workers after the day they work at the polls, we would be testing every employee everywhere all the time. They can certainly call their doctor if they feel they've been exposed, but some of that sort of curiosity testing, and I know that's tough because we're saying don't really do the curiosity testing, but we want widespread testing. We want the availability of testing when there's a need to do it. The curiosity testing really isn't as much of a benefit as just making sure that we have testing available for everyone. And as businesses go back, we want people to be able to go get a test and get it done quickly. We could certainly look into it for poll workers, but if to say that a poll worker should get tested in the event that they're even if they're asymptomatic, we would be testing everyone. Question from Kate. Good questions today. Ocean State draw block closed. Was it because a worker had COVID or due to road repair over the Neponset River? They did have a positive case, and they chose on their own to close. They did not inform us they were closing. We were aware of the case. So different businesses do follow different protocols. The contact tracing happens no matter what. So let's take a particular retail store. Let's call it Tony's Shoe Store. And one of my shoe workers ends up testing positive. The health department does the contact tracing. So they'll look back and say, okay, when did they work? Were they in contact with anyone? They look at when they were home, whether they were somewhere else. And then they'll go do the isolation for those individuals as well. So maybe they'll say, all right, well, this employee had a 30-minute meeting with the manager, so yes, they've got to be quarantined. Or, they were there for 6 hours and they were in the back room stocking shoes and they think they took a break with one employee. Yes, that person needs to be quarantined. And then they'll go, generally in a retail store, the likelihood that a customer is going to be considered a close contact is very rare. I guess it does depend on the business. Shoe stores may have been a bad example because I tend to just go in and look at 5 pairs and buy one. I don't know if for some people it's a more detailed or involved process. So let's assume whatever your retail experience is a fairly short process. Airflow and air quality in a building is important, but again, if you are wearing your mask and the folks there are wearing a mask, the likelihood that you as a customer in that store will end up catching COVID if somebody's positive is incredibly low. And we're seeing that because we've seen retail now having been open for, let's see, June 8th is when outdoor dining opened, and I believe that's when retail opened. So 2.5 months, we've seen next to no retail spread. Now, retail stores are still supposed to be monitoring the number of people that are in the store. So if you ever feel there's too many people in there, that's where you want to, maybe take a consideration. I know some folks don't wear masks, and they'll they'll give the reason, and it's their right to, that they have a medical condition that prevents them from wearing a mask. We certainly understand that. The recommendation from our health department generally is if you have a medical condition that's preventing you from wearing a mask, you should really be considering what risk situations you're putting yourself in. Generally, that's not an isolated medical condition, but you should really consider exactly what you are doing with if you're not able to wear a mask. And generally, if you have a health condition that prevents you from wearing a mask, you should really consider what level of exposure you yourself are willing to put yourself up to. Comment from Sarah about tested at the Wellesley drive-through site. Testing is much more widely available now and will continue to go. Um, the great question from Rachel. How are the funds in the Norwood Fund doing? I will get an update. I might have was probably supposed to get a few update for a few weeks ago. I do know we have been getting more requests for the portion of it that goes through Gift of Warmth, which is utility assistance, and that is running low. There's still funds for seniors and veterans, and then we still have some food funds, but we have been drawing it down. There is always a need. We are talking internally about what we can do, excuse me, long term with the Norwood Fund. It's COVID related. We may want to look at sort of a permanent system so we always have some donation funds available to help residents in need. Long term, it would make sense for us to sort of put it off to a its own sort of 501c3 because it is a little complicated for the town to perpetually take in money and do donations. We can do it in the short term. We're obviously doing it for COVID. Long term, it might be a good idea for us to look at ways to do something sort of separate. So if anyone would be interested in working on something like that, you can always let me know. Some towns, we don't have a United Way nearby. What other towns did is they had a United Way. We were one of the towns who said, well, we don't have another way to be able to do this, so let's do it. So we may want to set something up akin to Circle of Hope. We wouldn't want to take fundraising from other areas, so we'd have to see how we do it. But it could be just a small nonprofit with a few people that works with town staff. The staff do the intake process and say, hey, here's a chance to, do some one-time aid for that food aid. I do know we received a little over $140,000 in money to help with rent and mortgage payments. That's being done through the I think through either MAPC or SMOC. We can get that information in the comments. We may add funds to that down the road out of our CARES Act funding once we sort of settle out the CARES Act funding. But that's for grants we were able to get for some rental relief. We looked at trying to raise funds for that, but the need is so great that the Norwood Fund would have been just overwhelmed with something like that. COVID question here. Are you tracking COVID numbers week to week? If yes, do you think the uptick was due to the CDC system that upgrades, that tracks the numbers? I know numbers are higher in mass because of it. We actually track daily. We go onto the database and pull the numbers. There's always a slight discrepancy between our numbers and the state numbers, and it's just, we always look at what we consider a number and what they consider a number. And it's never off by much. It's just off by 1 or 2. They'll call and say, you have 9 cases. And we'll say, well, we have 8 cases. So where are you getting 9 from? And then they'll say, oh, well, it's this case last week. And we'll say, well, last week we had a slightly different number. So there's always a variation of 1 or 2 in there. Any positive cases get put into the state's Maven system. And that's where we pull it directly from. And that's where the state pulls their numbers from. So I don't believe the CDC system upgrade caused any particular jump in our numbers or drop in our numbers. And I know the state did undergo some upgrades, so we don't think that's related to it. But the overall increase in our numbers, it could be a general increase. I mean, we've been very low for a while, and we kept saying, well, outdoor dining started, prepare for a jump in numbers, and it didn't happen. And then the retail, we said, oh, numbers are going to go up, and then it didn't happen. And then when indoor dining happened, we said, oh, you wait, indoor dining is going to cause it to go up, up, up. And that didn't really happen yet. So we've continued to sort of see that we've done very well so far. Katie, the rental assistance being open to undocumented immigrants, that is a good question. I do not know off the top of my head. It is state or federal money that we were able to secure, and we're running a program through, I believe, SMOC, the Southern Middlesex Opportunity Council. It could be MAPC. We'll get the information in there. I do not know. That's another reason why we may want to look at a sort of permanent Norwood Fund type nonprofit to be able to help with things like that, because the town struggles to do that. But that would be a good avenue. I know that some folks in town were very generous, helping a few folks who were having that challenge. Yeah, Shelley, you're right. Okay, so the state upgrade, we don't think so, but they always sort of go in and clear up their data and sometimes find a case or two. There's always a little bit of shifting of cases too. It's gotten better. Where the town would we'd find a case that got assigned to Norwood and it wasn't a Norwood case, and maybe it was a Braintree case or a Walpole case or something like that. Stacey Lane is aggressive at working with DPH and saying, hey, this case you're counting to us, it's not us. But sometimes it does take a week or two. And as I said, we did have a case that was somebody who was attending something out of state, was out of state for quite a while, but had a Norwood address, and it counted as a Norwood case. They got their contact tracing out and out of state. That was all taken care of there. And it counts as a Norwood case, but that person has not been in town in weeks and won't be coming back to town for weeks. What we're going to have to see is the next couple of weeks what holds. So are we still in yellow next week? Are 18 cases in a 2-week period? Is that our new normal? Is it 40 cases? Is it 60 cases? Is it 80 cases? Or do we drop down to green next week? So it's really about looking at the trend week to week. I kept waiting for about 2 weeks after each milestone, outdoor dining, indoor dining, retail, and saying, where's it going to happen? Where's it going to happen? Where's it going to happen? And it hadn't happened. Well, now we're finally seeing a little bit of a bump. So it's generally related to behaviors 2 weeks ago. But as of right now, there's no correlation where we can say, this person got it from a restaurant, this person got it from a restaurant, this person got it from here. There's no correlation. There's been no restaurant or retail cases, and knock on wood, 1,100 camp participants and 2,600 pool participants as of last week, no cases. Towns that had problems, their lifeguards were going off and sort of partying together, and we luckily have not had that, so we've been doing well. From Cullen, out of context, want to personally thank the town for painting the Jersey barriers down at Central. The painter that was chosen did an incredible job and adds to the appeal, and love the new tables and chairs added this morning. Thank you. We do appreciate that. If you knew the journey to get those new tables and chairs, which were supposed to be the original tables and chairs, we ordered them. They were back ordered. They were shipped on a truck. They were not be shipped on a truck. We had to have facilities in DPW build tables. We finally got those tables in, but we're happy that we added some there. And I believe we've added picnic tables to Father Max, the senior center, and maybe the high school, whereas we finally got picnic tables that we'd ordered in. And I agree, the artists, it was a combination of a few people. They did an incredible job with the Jersey barriers. What we're talking about, folks, is if you go down to Central Street, both ends are blocked off by Jersey barriers. If you look at the artwork that was done there, it is absolutely incredible. I know I'm a terrible artist. I thought they looked great when we just painted them plain white or gray, and I said, oh, they look wonderful. And then they did sort of the first coat of like green and blue, and I said, these look beautiful, and I thought it was going to stop there. They've done an incredible job. The Jersey barriers at Vico's are town Jersey barriers as well. They did an awesome job there. And what we're planning on trying to do in the spring, tentatively, is under the bridge on Manhattan Street, there's sort of Jersey barriers. We sort of built our own structure there going along. In the spring, we're going to look at patching that and repairing it, and then seeing if we can do something along there as well, because they are absolutely, absolutely gorgeous. So thank you for that. The shout out. The artists did a great, great job. We're going to be trying to showcase them on social media in the next few weeks and just let everyone know who the artists were. I believe they're all in Norwood. Some of them are Norwood High students and Norwood High grads, and some other folks who are local artists. And it added some wonderful art. That, as well as a project some of our interns worked on over the summer. We're going to look to do an Art Around the Common or Art Around Downtown project next summer as well. Sheila, hospitalizations seem to be pretty stable, which is what we've talked about and the important trend to watch. You're absolutely right. I kept watching that the ICU number go down, 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 and then went up, and down, 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 and went up. But I think the state's number were 68 ICU cases as of yesterday. That number, as well as the overall hospitalization number, hasn't gone up, which is a good thing. Remember, some people will have a mild case of COVID. Some people will get very sick. Protecting the healthcare system and the health delivery system is going to be making sure that nothing gets overwhelmed. We have plenty of capacity right now. That's not a cause for anyone to be a little foolish in their behavior, but we're not seeing an increase in hospitalizations. That's a good thing. Now, it could be because you're seeing more spread among younger individuals, and we're seeing that a little bit in Norwood, but the average age since March of our cases in Norwood is still 56 of our positive cases. Interestingly enough, we are now 60-40 female to male. We don't know why our numbers flipped like that, but that's the total amount. And just some testing information, and then I'll get to Katie's question real quick. To date, the number of Norwood people who have been tested, and this could include multiple tests, is 9,200. So that's almost 1 in 3, although we do know some people have had multiple tests. Those are the PCR tests, so that's the nose test, if you will. And the test number for the last 14 days is 1,343 tests in the last 13 days. Sorry, last 14 days. Katie, are there specific types of masks the health department is recommending? We've seen great information. We've not seen great about gaiters, but what does the Department of Health recommend? Wear a mask is what they recommend. Obviously, the better quality, the 2-ply or the 3-ply masks are better, but you have to identify your own particular need, what you're using it for, what your contact level is. But remember, public health and infectious disease control and really epidemiology, it's about the totality of our actions and how do we protect public health? How does the public health become healthier? Wear a mask. Wear a mask. 99% of people wearing a simple paper or simple cloth mask is much better than 70% of people wearing the best mask out there. Now, what we'll do is we'll have Segal put something out about specifically. There is a slight difference between the one and the two layer masks. But remember, it's about what you're doing and what your contact level is with people. Where I find the gaiters to be most effective is those short interactions where I want to wear a mask when I'm walking by somebody if I'm walking around Norwood Center. So it's pretty easy to just go bloop and pop the mask up and then bloop. That little teeny action protects me and protects that other person. Now, in the office, I have my gaiter on usually for, again, if I'm walking down the hallway, it's easy to flip it up or down. If I'm going to meet with somebody, I tend to put on a cloth mask because if I'm sitting close to them, and I generally am not, we're right now in town hall, at least the way my office is set up, I can always sit behind my desk and I'm reasonably far away from people. Again, it really depends. If you're a teacher or a daycare worker and you're with little kids, you may want a slightly stronger mask because you're having more of an interaction. If you're out going for a run, now in theory, if you're going for a run, you're sort of pushing out more droplets, but your contact with other people is going to be very casual. You could have no mask and somebody could have no mask, and you could talk for 10 minutes and one of you could have COVID and you could not get COVID. You could also have a mask, they could have a mask, they could cough, and you could end up catching COVID. So there's a lot of factors, but the bottom line is any mask is better than no mask, and wear your mask. I know we all get frustrated, and I do as well, where sometimes you got to wear your mask, every time you have to do it, but you wear your mask into the restaurant, you put your mask on, 7 seconds, and then you get seated, and then you sit down and take it off. That 7 seconds is important. Somebody could be walking by you, a waiter, a staff. We know you got to keep your mask on. We know you got to keep it over the nose, but we're all also human beings. Sometimes it drops down. So wear the mask. We'll have Segal put something out specific about it, but the bottom line is any mask is better than no mask. The gaiters are safe if you are a dentist and you're working on somebody. I would not, and I'm sure they have guidelines, so I'm not giving guidelines to dentists here. That's probably a KN95 that they're going to want to be able to wear in a situation like that. But if I was a retail worker, now again, the average retail worker standing at the counter, most people may only be coming up for a couple of seconds, 2 or 3 minutes and then leave. But you're having so many of those. I would want a better form-fitting mask that's definitely 2 layers. Because that's going to be a little bit better. It is generally about the overall length and I don't want to say the quality of your interactions, but how close you're interacting with somebody. I mean, if you open your door and there's somebody out there, mowing your lawn and you're 10 feet away from them, that's different than when you're sitting across from somebody getting your taxes done. But we'll get some specific guidance out there. But the big picture is wear a mask, wear a mask, wear a mask. It helps. We're all human. We all forget. But please wear a mask, especially when you're out there in the public, going into stores, going into buildings. Even sometimes if you work in a locked office building and you're not really coming into contact with anyone, we all got to get in a better habit of doing that. Question or comment from Colin. Huge shout out to the rec department and the camp program they put on this summer and finding a way to extend the program for 2 weeks. Norwood Rec has done an incredible job this summer. We couldn't agree more. 1,100 camp participants this summer. Norwood Rec was able to do that. Some towns didn't have any rec programs. And knock on wood, we could still have a positive case, but 1,100 kids went through camp, no cases. And that's as much as it's to do with the kids and the parents as the rec department staff on what they were able to do and making sure that they kept themselves safe and that they behaved appropriately outside of the workplace, which makes a really good, that's ultimately what it is. We can control things in the workplace, but if somebody gets done at 5 o'clock and goes off to a party with 40 people, we can't really control that. So absolutely kudos to them. Extended Day did great with their program, and Extended Day is working. I don't know if they'll be able to do it. They're trying to come up with a program for some families who absolutely have no options for childcare. The rec department is actually taking the lead. We're trying to have them find a way to do childcare for essential employees who have to go to work, because we're worried that we might lose a good portion of our workforce when school starts, and then we're not going to be able to provide critical services. Spacing is a consideration, safety and public health, but they're with camps and pools this summer and everything else they're being asked to do, they're stepping up to the plate. They've done a great job. Kate, can you keep having these live once a week meeting updates after COVID? They are very helpful. Yes, it's become a norm, and we all talk about it in the office, and it's been built into the schedule. We kept them up when I went on vacation. I had Bernie do them. We'll have future guests, but I think this is a great way for us to sort of communicate and just give updates. I can't wait for the day when we can do one of these and it is no COVID updates at all because it's down and past us, which would be a good thing. I think I'm going to move on to a couple of other items. Just one last item on our COVID-related updates, and of course we'll continue to take questions. We had 18 cases in a 14-day period, which caused us to go from green to yellow. Our peak 14-day period back in April, we had about 260 cases. That was before the state contact training collaborative, the CTC program that the state had. So it was just Stacy and Segal in the health department. We were down a public health nurse at the time. Now we're fully staffed in the public health nurse. We've added another health nurse. So we've handled much worse with much less. So 18 cases is not the direction we want to go in. It may be the new normal, but we feel confident that we can certainly handle the 18 and then many more. The eVacuum store on Moore Street has a selection of KN95 masks on their website. Bought a package, 4-layer and very comfortable. Jeff, yeah, absolutely. So always shop local when you can, and by all means continue to visit our great local businesses. Speaking of which, Dean Street, the bridge construction project is going well. I know the traffic is hell for the neighbors in that neighborhood and anyone trying to go there. And we apologize for that. I think I'd said a few weeks ago, there is no easy way to do it. We are going to have some details there, certainly for the election and school opening. And we may just be adding daytime details in general. We've set up the details for the election and for when school opens because it's just been difficult. We appreciate folks bearing with us. We're on schedule. I mentioned at the Selectmen's meeting Tuesday night that the first sort of 25% of a project like that is always the most frightening because that's when you kind of rip everything up and you do the test bores and you do the camera investigations and everything else to see what your infrastructure looks like. But when you rip it all open, that's when you see, what's really wrong. Sigh of relief, the first 25% has gone well. That leads us to believe that the project will continue on pace and still be finished without any weather or other related issues. There's always the possibility of a problem, but it's going well. We're happy with the contractor's work. We know we're doing some road work in that area, and it's kind of a catch-22 with how do you spread stuff out, and do you live in perpetual construction for 8 months out of the year, or is it just get it done and do it, and then you don't have to look at it again for a while? I keep telling everyone that the culvert that we're installing under the Dean Street Bridge, 60-year lifespan. So hopefully think of where you'll be in 60 years when folks are going to be here talking about, oh my God, I can't believe we have to detour for the Dean Street Bridge. Now, some of us will be here in 60 years and we'll say, oh God, they're doing this bridge again. They just did it over. But for a 60-year project, 12 weeks, we're adding some police details. People have been great. There are some businesses there, the frame shop and stashes, that whenever you have these kinds of shutdowns, it does impact them. So please try to make sure let them know that we know that they're still there and we're trying to help them out. Visit all of our businesses in town. We, of course, support all of our businesses, but at this point in time, I know the road closure is hurting them. But we've done well so far. So hopefully that project will continue and be done, and then it'll be somebody's responsibility 60 years from now to get that done. The hospital update is that we don't have much of an update. We're meeting with them. We have a variety of meetings with hospital staff. There's health meetings. There's the fire department meets regularly. The inspectors are there quite a bit with them. There's been a lot of damage to the hospital, the HVAC and the mechanical systems. We're working now on crafting the zoning ordinance that would have to go through town meeting that would allow them to rebuild the hospital. Their goal is still to get the ER up and running as soon as they possibly can. And it's just long and complicated. And what's more complicated is, if you think about your basement flooding, and Katie's mentioning flooding here, we'll talk about that in a minute. You can sort of dry your basement and put it back together. With a hospital, once you've had sort of that gray water, so that rainwater or that runoff infiltrate a hospital room, as tiny as the percentage of a chance is that it could lead to any sort of a mold or respiratory issue, it's a hospital. So it's not like this happened to my example of a shoe store, and shoe stores are perfectly safe, but it happened to a hospital. There's just a very different standard of care and construction for a hospital, for patients to be seen in a hospital, than there is for virtually anything else we do. Even for schools, which have very high, strict standards, you can repair it. An office building, clean it, dry it, get it tested, it's good to go. Hospitals are very, very difficult. We don't want the ER to be closed any longer than it needs to be. But when you think about the way an ER works, and anyone who's a nurse will know this, but I am. It's, we all picture, I think, the movies where you're being rushed in on a bed, and that does happen sometimes. But if somebody's having a heart issue, they want their cath lab running. If you break your leg, you need to go get an X-ray. You may need to go get an MRI, and I'm sure there's a nurse who could explain the level of difference between just a traditional X-ray and an MRI. I've been to an emergency room twice in the last 10 years for kidney stones, and I don't know, they put me through some machine, but you need to have that machine. You need to have all of the, the airflow and all the other things that you need, and those are connected to power sources. Those are connected to gas sources. Those are connected to oxygen sources. So an emergency room is incredibly, incredibly complex in that you need all of these things for the emergency room to be able to actually function. And it's, the hospital is facing this square peg and round hole challenge, similar to what the schools are doing, where every time they think there's a piece of the puzzle ready to go, it's, well, how do we get, the x-rays up and running? Well, all right, now we need to do an exterior power source out here. Well, wait a minute, that's going over here, and that's needs to be moved over here. So that's sort of the complexity that they're facing. Steward's a private company. They have a lot of resources behind them, but remember that they're losing millions of dollars every day. I know during the peak of COVID, with the shutdown of non-essential services, they were losing around $500,000 a day. Now, Katie's question. So I wish there was more of an update on the hospital. It's going to be a long, challenging process. We have a meeting to discuss the zoning next week. We're going to hopefully bring a zoning change to town meeting in October to make sure that the hospital can rebuild what they need to build. The current zoning is ancient. I mean, there's been a hospital there for a long time, so it needs to be looked at so we can get a modern hospital facility back where we want it, and get those jobs back, as well as that purchasing power and the ER back for the community and the other 250,000 people who rely on Norwood Hospital. Additional flood remediation plans, given what looks like will be a fairly active storm season and how the town was devastated in June. So there's a couple of things that we're going to do. The selectmen have us, Mark Ryan, town engineer and DPW director, and I are going to come back with a proposal for some smaller drainage programs that we can look at. We're going to put drain maintenance is a bad word. We're going to put stormwater infrastructure in the capital plan. The challenge is we're probably going to come back with a recommendation that we want some residents to form a committee to look at how we go about solving this comprehensively. Some communities have stormwater utilities, and that's a fee, it's a charge, just like anything else. But that's how they handle stormwater management. Because if we were to really start to invest in our stormwater system, and we have a good stormwater system, we are better off than most communities. But to really put a lot of dollars to it, it would crowd out so much other general fund services that it would almost become unbearable. I mean, we had a study for the Meadowbrook area done in 2004. If we were to do all the recommendations in that, $10 million or more, and that's one section of town. So we would need a reliable revenue source to comprehensively continue to address stormwater and to continue to increase stormwater, our ability to manage and handle stormwater. We're always making improvements. So every year there's always something that's being done. We want to do more. We need a dedicated revenue stream to likely do more than we're doing. One of the items we are looking at, sort of related to that, is in the fall we're going to be bringing before town meeting, and it's going to go through capital outlay and the Finance Commission and Selectmen, an infrastructure plan that over the next 5 to 7 years would see a big investment in our water infrastructure, so not drainage but water, as well as our road paving. Now the benefit to that is that the more you take care of all of your infrastructure, the better that you could the better you're maintaining it all along, the better it all helps. Because when we go on, and sometimes we just do a new skim coat on a road, but when we repave a road, you're fixing your catch basins, you're making any repairs that are there, you're identifying anything else that needs to be done, and you're able to address that. So that we think we can do. It'll be money off the water rates and money out of borrowing. We'll do some of our normal drainage projects, but the next step would be comprehensively solving drainage throughout the town. Requires an additional revenue source. And what I know Milton's done a stormwater utility, just because the millions and millions of dollars that are required need to come from somewhere, and it's just such an undertaking. Bob mentions about a bioswale. The problem with stormwater management is I always find it fascinating. You got to be careful that everywhere you make an enhancement. I guess here's an example. If you live on a road, we can just pave your road, and you get a new road, and it's great and it's beautiful. And when you pull home every day and you come out in the morning to go to work, you get a nice paved road. And that road is part of a network, but your road is nice and neat. Well, if you have drainage issues on your street and we just put in a giant pipe, your street may not have any issues, except that pipe might be this big. What is it going into? And where's that pipe going? Where's that pipe going? Where's that going? So it's not that you have to replace the whole system at once. It's just you always got to look at what your pipe size is, what your drainage is, where it's coming from. Can it handle it? Can it go into something else? Otherwise, that sometimes ends up being the problem. You may have flooding on a particular street. The pipes on that street, the storm drain pipes on that street may be able to handle it, but it may be going into a smaller pipe. Now, some people will tell me, well, Tony, good civil engineering, you would never do that. I've seen it. Norwood's better than other communities, but I can tell you I've worked in communities where you've had pipes like this, go to pipes like this, and then the road floods. We don't have too much of that, but you've got to always be looking at sort of the infrastructure down the road. And then at the end of the day, most of our drainage goes in, most of our stormwater, not sewer, of course, goes into the Neponset at one point or another. So we also have to make sure we're not pushing so much water all out at once that it's causing a biological diversity issue in the water stream if too much is coming out at once. We have to work with the Watershed Association and balance that. So it's incredibly fascinating and incredibly complicated. I'm sure some folks are bored and they just don't want their basements to flood, which we understand. But I think it's worth us comprehensively starting to address it. We're only going to benefit from it. Norwood is fully built out. We've been fully built out for a long time, but 20 years ago, our neighbors weren't as fully built out as they were, and now they're starting to get built out. That has an impact on it. We do know that climate change is happening. The prevalence of storms is increasing, and the number of 10-year storms, 20-year storms, 50-year storms, 100-year storms, that's all increasing. So it's going to be a need that the community is going to have to say, where do we want to be 30 or 40 years from now? Now, the storm we had on June 28th was historic in a lot of ways. 4.5 inches of rain in under 90 minutes. We could never build a storm system to handle that. However, we can always do more, and perhaps we should do more, so that way if a storm like that happens every 25 years, every 30 years, it is truly a, who would have thought this would have happened every 20 or 30 years. We need to make sure we can survive those 30-year cycles without having more water in the basement. And every time since June 28th, when we start getting rain, I start getting nervous. Are we going to get flooded basements again? And it's not just about flooded basements. There was a state official who had asked me in a call about why it was our responsibility to pay for people to pump out their basements. He and I have a fundamental different philosophy about what local government should be doing. But people's homes were damaged. It wasn't just, the basement where we have an old pool table was damaged. We have people who still don't have bedrooms that they can live in. And it's not just you had a cool finished basement. It was a matter of... that was people's living space for their home. We have a lot of smaller homes in Norwood. A question from Bob, should new buildings have their own containment systems? Yes and no. So one of the things that the Conservation Commission does well is whenever site plan comes before them or comes before the planning board, we always have to look at drainage as part of what they're doing, whether it's an in-building containment system or the way they're designing a lot, especially if they're increasing an impervious surface. If you look at where Wendy's in that new, the new Wendy's, but the Wendy's in the gas station is, there's a retention basin in there. Those are part of some of the low impact design methods that we've been working into projects as they go forward. You do need redevelopment for that to happen, but it's absolutely essential that when new projects come before planning and conservation and zoning, that's always part of the discussion that, okay, if you're changing the impervious area, where is it going? What's happening to your drainage? And where is it going? It would depend on the size and scale of the building and what they're doing. I know Moderna did a lot of work because they had a substantial facility upgrade there. If we were to see other large buildings like that, we don't have too much. We have a lot of construction in town. There's not a whole lot of brand new commercial construction. There's a lot of reconstruction. But anytime a new building goes in, it needs to be part of the discussion. We haven't had a lot of new single family homes in the sense of new subdivisions with 20 and 30 single family homes going in, but those all need to be part of the conversation. Brand new ground up commercial or industrial, it's absolutely critical that the design review process include how to manage their stormwater and their runoff. Things like green roofs can be helpful. Green roofs aren't always as effective in the Northeast. We have this problem with the winter where it kills everything, but newer buildings and newer systems designed to a more modern standard are incredibly helpful in managing where that storm flow is going, so we're mitigating it. The town needs to continue to invest in our stormwater infrastructure as well. And folks should make sure that if they do have pumps in their basement, those are supposed to go into the drainage system, not into the sewer system. That can cause a big problem with your sewer backing up. Question from Doris: is there drain work being done near the new rink? There was a car stuck in the flood Sunday. Trucks could go through. A car was stuck. I don't know if there's new drainage work being programmed. There's, it's actually, I don't know if you'd call it a swale or not. It was originally thought to be a stream, and then it was intentionally found out sometime in the 30s they intentionally dug it. There's sort of some runoff along the road there, which was intentionally done to do that. So that skating club property has some space in the beginning. That's a very wet area of town. But you bring up a good point here. If you see water beyond maybe an inch or two, and only if you're certain if it's an inch or two, don't drive your car through it. Your car will probably get stuck. Cars are not designed to go through water. They're designed to have rain hit them. So whenever you see that, just turn around, go somewhere else, try to pull off into a retail lot or something if you can. Wait for it to pass. The drainage systems generally will catch up. It's certainly something we can look at, but I'm not sure if University Ave is generally a concern. I don't know if we've had flooding there recently. We'd have to check with the DPW. But mostly that runoff will go away shortly. Just don't drive your car through runoff. We're going to put the early voting information in the comment box. Early voting is going on. The clerk's office is doing a great job. I think as everyone knows, we have a primary September 1st, and then we have our general election the first week of November. So we encourage everyone to vote. I think, as I always say, vote early, vote often. They're doing a great job with early voting. We'll have Joe get that information there. It is at Memorial Hall at Town Hall. That is the only door that's open. When Town Hall reopens the day after Labor Day, that will be the only door that's open into the building. And Town Hall will be open, but we're asking you make an appointment before you come in. Most of you have probably been in Town Hall. It's a big building from the outside. It's a small building inside. The offices are very small. Our ability to have more than a person or two there and maintain social distancing is very limited. We'll have sort of a control person at the front entrance there, the main entrance, who will be taking your information and making sure that they can help you before you have to go to an office and making sure you have an appointment. So call Town Hall, call the office you need directly, or you can call the switchboard and make an appointment. All of our services are available digitally, by phone, or by mail. We have 2 mail drop-off boxes that you can use for your mail-in ballots or anything else you have to get to the town. One right by Memorial Hall and one in the parking lot in the rear. Town Hall, we call it the Town Hall Annex lot in between Town Hall and the white print shop building, which incidentally has a mural of the Earth and the Recycling logo that was done by one of the students who's also painting on Central Street. So we please call for an appointment, and only make an appointment if you need to. Services are available online. You can mail things in. We'll make an appointment if it's something you need to come in for, but we don't want to put you at risk. We don't want to put employees at risk. Town Hall is unique because it's an office building, but it's also a public-facing building, whereas usually if you have an office building, it's generally the public don't just walk into your office. I mean, you can never walk into any of the state executive offices or a federal office building because they don't directly serve customers in the way that we do. We have an office building where we have staff that have to work at their offices, but we also have to take permit requests and other items. So it's a little bit of a unique building in that sense. It is very hard to maintain social distancing in that building. So please call to make an appointment if you need one. Chances are you'll be encouraged to take care of whatever business you need over the phone or by mail or by digital. And if you have to have an appointment, by all means, we'll work on that with you. But there's almost nothing that we can't do remotely. And I know some folks may want to just feel good about getting back into Town Hall, but it's a tough building to maintain social distancing. It is an old building. So Please keep that in mind. Call to make an appointment. If you need to make an appointment, you will be amazed at how much we can do by mail. We can all go back to supporting the postal service by mailing a little bit more. Maybe it takes a little bit more. You can make payments online. And we are looking at, once we reopen, some of the smaller items. I think we're actually meeting next week, like a dump stickers and trash stickers, how we can make those an online process as well. So that way it becomes even easier so that all of our services are digital by phone or by mail. So when town hall opens, please, please, please make an appointment. Again, those of you who've been in the building, it's next to impossible to socially distant more than one person at most of the offices. And we've had to give up the meeting rooms to create workspaces so we can even keep people having a little bit of distance in between them. So early voting information is there. Vote early, vote often. The clerk's office has done an incredible job. Our flood damage grant program, we started sending out letters of award this week. We are not, to our knowledge, receiving any money from the state, so it is just our local funds. The governor's office has worked with us in making sure we could use some of these local funds, but we at this point don't know if we're going to get anything else from the state, but we will still be able to help a lot of residents. It may not be the full amount. It may be that you got 20% or 30%, but we're trying to get help to some folks. But we did mail out our first set of letters earlier in this week, and the team has been going through. I mean, I got to give credit to Bernie Cooper, Monica Medeiros out of the HR office, Joe Collins and Kathy Carney, Xavier Cullen, who's one of our summer interns, and Dante Zalvadar, who's also one of our summer interns, who have been, you've probably heard from them if you applied for the program. They have been doing all of the incredible amount of complex work to take the applications, get all of the information that's required, all of the information that's required to verify everything. We had a great team of people, too many to name, a lot of volunteers from different boards and committees and town staff that went out and did the site visits. I think we did 140 or 160 site visits, so we appreciate them. It's been an immense undertaking, but we're one of those unique situations where the town is actually going to be able to get some aid to residents who really got the short end of a stick in a once in a 30-year storm. So you'll continue to hear from the staff that are working on that program as we get awards out, as we look to track all of the tax information that we need and all the verification. Vote early, vote often. Yeah, remember, you can only vote once per election, but it's always a great phrase of vote early, vote often. Elections, incidentally, while I'm thinking about it, we have a much safer election system here in Massachusetts than the rest of the country. And I say that having only voted in Massachusetts and Maine when I lived in Maine, which has a similar system. You fill in the ballot, it goes into the machine. It's pretty foolproof. I don't know how some states have screwed up their elections again and again. We have plenty of staff. We have great staff in the clerk's office. We have good systems, so I'm not worried about it here in Norwood. If you're feeling unsafe about voting in person, you can, of course, mail your ballot in or vote early, but the polls will be open. We'll have a lot of the same procedures we did before on the 1st and for the election in November to keep people safe. We'll have masks available. We're probably not going to do the little baggies again. When we first put that together, nobody had masks, and we were worried we were even going to have the masks. But you'll be given a pen, and the staff will be behind the plastic barriers. They'll be wearing masks. We'll be doing the regular sanitizing. So the election will be even safer now than it was in June. So by all means, you can come out and vote. We want everyone to come out and vote and exercise your democratic right to vote. And absolutely, Catherine, the clerk's office has done a fantastic job. You'd think an office like the town clerk would be quiet throughout all of this. Mary Lou Fullen and her team in there. The challenge with early voting and mail-in voting is that on election day, the election is exactly the same amount of work, even if you had everyone voting ahead of time. We still have to get all of the booths ready and all the polling places ready. So they're doing double and triple duty. They're in there on the weekends. They're in there on Saturdays and Sundays, all to make it happen, to make democracy safe for each of us. And we certainly appreciate them for that. So we talked about the storm grant, talked about early voting. I actually got 2 items off my list. I believe I have reached the end of my list of items to talk about. So if there are questions, we'd be more than happy to take questions, whether it's COVID related or any of our other town operations. I'm going to scroll up and see if I missed any questions. Flood remediation plans. One item I'll talk about related to flood remediation in general is the there's two kinds of flooding. I know that sounds crazy. There's storm drains are overloaded and that water kind of goes into your basement, and then there's a water body rises above its levels and then floods. We can do more to help with both. Doris, may I suggest a video in which Mary Lou explains the verification process of a mail-in ballot? Please, tired of arguing about it safe. We can certainly do that. So in brief, and I'll have Mary Lou do a little PSA on it. The mail-in ballot, you mail it in, it goes into a machine. Your name gets checked off on the list. And so the clerk sits there at the end of the day and they say, okay, 500 ballots in the machine, 500 people checked off, you got the envelopes, that's your check system to make sure that the envelopes matches the sheets. It really is simple. I mean, it is as simple as can be. Julie, I said, does town meeting but we'll get Mary Lou to do a PSA on it. Does town meeting need to meet earlier to approve the additional funds for the school's hybrid plan? They do not. We're probably still going to meet in October. I do suppose, hypothetically, if town meeting were to then say no, you could find yourself in a world of hurt. The school department has existing funds to draw on. It's within their authority to move the money in the budget around to be able to do it. What I'm going to propose is we know that state aid was level funded for the first quarter with FY21, FY20. However, we were anticipating, as a lot of other towns were, a substantial increase in state aid. The state decided to start with level funding it with last year without actually cutting any state expenses, but that's okay. They want us to raise local taxes and not on the state. But my proposal to the board and to the FinCom and to town meeting is going to be that the budget we passed in June goes forward. We take free cash, which is surplus revenue, and in the amount of whatever we projected our increase to be. So if we're predicting a $1.7 million increase in state aid, we take that amount of free cash and we balance the budget with that, continue to make our deposits into override stabilization, the stabilization fund. That puts us in a good financial position. We'll then take free cash and give the schools the allocation that they need to make the hybrid model work. And then we'll see what we have left with free cash. We may do some capital with it, some investment into our funds, and then some we want to leave. We'll probably have a higher number than we normally had. However, we didn't spend our free cash last year waiting for this year. So the number will seem a lot higher. We had a good year in terms of that. But if we do that, what it lets us do is no rollbacks on any of our investments in the last couple of years. So, we passed an override. We're making investments in education and in a couple other things. Keeps us in a good financial position. Then when we look at the FY22 budget, we assume state aid will go up a little bit. We'll need to look at what the gap there is. And we don't want to always offset the budget with free cash. But if we have the cash to do it, we're looking at what we should do is a 2 to 3 year offset to get us to balance. Now, if this year goes well, we can put money into override stabilization, offset the loss in state aid, the budget's balanced. FY22 rolls around. The original part of the plan was to have no drawdown from override stabilization, but to have no input in it. So we either do that, but because the budget already projects a $700,000 input, we have the possibility next year to say, okay, well, we can take that $700,000 savings plus maybe free cash, and then the budget balances, and we're still ahead of the game with override stabilization. We then have 2 years to draw that down, and that might last a third or a fourth year. So absent the economy collapsing, we could have a couple of okay years where we projected the override would last 5 years. We might now conservatively be able to get it to 6 or 7 if we make the right decisions this year at town meeting. A couple of years of some hard decisions, one of them being the override, but fixing some of the shared revenue issues we had where we had certain grants booked as revenues that ended up eating out at free cash. We should be seeing a good free cash generation, and now's the time to use it strategically, invest in a way that we can stretch out that override fund so that way it's 6 to 7 years before we'd be looking at any kind of a structural deficit again, and that's when you start that clawing back of the budget. So you could, maybe you have 1 or 2 tight years, and then you look at, okay, where are we? Maybe we don't need another override until year 10. I mean, wouldn't that be a good thing that we can go in and say, look, at now if we want to maintain the level of service, here's what we need. So we can we're in a good position to absorb impacts from COVID and to absorb the impact of the hybrid model. It is sort of things have kind of perfectly aligned that way. Had we not made some changes in how we budget the last couple of years and then had we not done the override, we would be in a world of hurt right now. Probably unimaginable. Forget about the whole override. Forget about the hybrid model. We wouldn't be able to afford virtually anything. We'd be looking at real hurt. So once again, not only did the initial impact of COVID, but now the need to do a hybrid model, the need to reduce state aid increases or to offset that. Had we not done the override, the community would be on a trajectory this way. Instead, financially, we are weathering COVID well, and the community is continuing to do well. The local economy is actually fairly strong, even though we have a high unemployment rate locally. Construction is ongoing. Businesses are still looking to locate to town, and we're locally in a pretty good position. If there are permanent social changes from COVID, and people are less inclined to want to live in the city, and you're seeing that in the real estate market, that actually bodes well for Norwood. Houses are expensive in Norwood. They're probably only going to get more so, but that bodes well for the town's ability to fund its services going forward. So, I think the one other benefit to COVID as it relates to the budget, and I know I'm getting a little off topic from your specific question, is the outdoor dining has worked incredibly well, and I think a lot of us all of a sudden said, why haven't we always been doing this? So we can't wait to do it again next year. The season's not over. I'm a little bit of a weenie when it comes to the cold, so but we're still having a lot of great weather. We'll probably continue to do it maybe into October. We got to talk with the restaurants and see what works for them. We want to maintain a certain quality, but we're going to do it again next year. And we can look forward to every summer in Norwood being really what was otherwise a good summer. I mean, we're dealing with COVID. We have a lot of problems in the country. In our little corner of it, it was otherwise a pretty good summer. And I think every year we can continue to look forward to those things. That's going to help enhance Norwood Center and bring the vibrancy, and it's brought the vibrancy that we always have wanted to see. The next step is that's what's going to lead to some of the investment that we want to see. That's going to lead to people from other towns coming to Norwood saying, hey, what are we doing tonight? Let's go out in Norwood Center. You're starting to see some storefronts in South Norwood fill up as well, and I think that's a good thing. We got to get some of the property owners down there to invest in some of the storefronts, but we can continue to do these things and engage in these placemaking activities and continue Norwood Center to and the whole community continuing to come alive and do well. So sorry, Julie, that's my really long answer to does town meeting need to meet earlier? They do not. The proposal that I would put forward is that we utilize free cash to adopt the school hybrid model and going forward. So other questions, I always love budget questions. Those are my most fun. Some good comments here about the election. You can use the online tracking your ballot. You can always just show up and vote in person. You can vote in person. Remember that if you're wearing a mask, your time at the poll is minimal and your interaction with other people is minimal. It is completely safe to go to the polls. So if you're totally worried about your vote being stolen, you can go to the polls and vote in person. We have a simple but good check and balance system in Massachusetts. And somebody there posted the track the ballot search. I'll actually go on and look on, see if I can find mine in a little bit. Other questions, comments, thoughts? We're at about the hour mark. You can always put them in the comments. We do sometimes reply to the comments a day or two later, and you can always email us at managers@norwoodma.gov. If we have no more questions, we'll go ahead and I'll end the live in just a minute. I want to thank Joe in my office for helping put these on. As always, thank all of you for joining us. We'll continue to bring you our weekly Thursday live update. If I keep doing them on my work from home day, I'll try to get some decoration or something back there or figure out how to do a background. But I want to thank you all for your time and your talent. And, of course, I want to thank all the employees we have in every department of the town and all of our teachers and our officials for keeping the town running and for what they're doing and going through. Particularly this week, I think our school committee and our administrators and the teachers at MPS for really going through a hard time trying to figure out something that nobody else has figured out before. With that, thank you, everyone. I hope you all have a great day. I hope you have a great Friday and a great weekend, and we will see you next Thursday. Email us at managers@norwoodma.gov, or you can always reply here in the comments. Thank you, everyone, and have a great one.